Stellenbosch, in the Cape of Good Hope, in the Republic of South Africa, a schoolgirl, aged 17 years, broke the women's world record for 5,000 meters. Her name was Zola, and the record which she had just won had previously been held by Miss Mary Decker of the United States of America. The timekeeper here on that windy evening, understandably, found it difficult to believe the evidence of his eyes. The schoolgirl's world record was disgracefully not recognized by the International Amateur Athletic Federation because young Zola happened to be a South African, and a white South African. The African National Congress and the anti-apartheid movement and various black states via the so-called United Nations have worked very hard to penalize white South African athletes. And in very particular, they have focused their questionable activities on the young lady from Bloemfontein, Miss Zola. This is Bloemfontein in the old Orange Free State, where Zola was born. And I have traveled here from Britain to try and unearth some home truths about her personal tragedy and what that personal tragedy represents to all white human beings and all black human beings, particularly here in this Republic of South Africa.
Before I realized I could run fast, or before my running career started, I think I had just a normal life, a childhood life like any other children had. I grew up on a small holding, or sort of a small farm, and most of my time was spent with animals. And I think that's where I got my love for animals, because they were my friends. We lived too far away from town to have any real friends outside school times.
Now, I don't believe that you were always happy. So what were the unhappier experiences?
The unhappier experiences were probably when my sister died when I was 13 years old. She was 24 years old, and we were very close, I think even more close than me and my parents were, because she was the older one in the family. And after that, I think all my energy and all my concentration went into running. It was sort of a way to escape, almost.
Looking at that film when you were 17 years old, I mean, it struck me that you had suffered very seriously, it seemed to me, when you were in the classroom, for instance, because I saw your face. And then I saw your face when you were running at the age of 17. And there was great pain on your face, but the pain of effort. And I had probably the right idea that you were running very fast away from a great unhappiness. And you'd say it was your sister.
Yes, definitely, I think so. I think that was the one incident in my life that totally changed my attitude to life and my outlook on life as it is, because suddenly you realize that death is very close by, because everybody lives as though death will never happen, and suddenly it happened.
What did you feel then when you were told that you were the fastest woman, albeit a very young woman, on earth, as far as we know, at that distance?
It was a nice experience to have run really fast and enjoy it. That was most important. But after the world record, so everything else changed. My whole lifestyle and people's attitudes towards me changed. So in that sense, I really hated the experience after the world record, and because suddenly I wasn't allowed to be myself anymore. You were Zola but the world record holder, not Zola anymore. I mean, in another 5 years' time, if you stop running, another 5 years' time, people won't know you anymore, or they won't be bothered about you anymore as they were then.
I'm not so sure that that will be true in your case.
Here in Britain, long ago during the 1960s, young Mr. Peter Hain led the anti-apartheid movement against primarily white South African athletes. And today, Miss Zola Budd is suffering the consequences.
If I go back to the first news that she was about to become a British citizen, apart from noting that she managed to get a passport in 3 weeks when it takes most people years, and if she had a black face she wouldn't have got one, I never wanted to demonstrate against her. I never joined the chorus of attacks on her because I thought she was in a way a victim. And in a sense, I suppose if I'm being honest, I had some sympathy for her. Then I saw what was being done in her name, and I looked at her silence, and I saw how she was being manipulated. Never once did she ever speak out against apartheid.
I think, bearing in mind, say, young people in Britain or Europe or India or America, places I've been to recently, I think for them to make such a categorical statement on such a complicated matter, in view of her background, living in Bloemfontein, was rather a lot, would be rather a lot to expect of her.
What, simply to make a simple human statement like that?
Well, she's made it on video in Bloemfontein.
My best friend when I grew up was a black boy, and it was always strange for me to see how children can play together and live together, but not grown-ups. So it was always this contradiction to me, and I have sympathy for people who don't have the means to develop or better their lifestyles. And I think it comes down to the principle of justice. But then again, justice isn't something you find on earth, is it?
But what I cannot understand is, as a human being who was surrounded by advisors, who had all the opportunities to prepare a carefully crafted statement that didn't get her into trouble politically, but allowed her to express a simple gesture of humanity, why she didn't do that. And if she had, things might have turned out very differently.
I would have been very worried if her older advisors had crafted a statement which would have given her protection to run.
Some white South African athletes have escaped the ruthless victimization that Miss Zola Budd has been subjected to. One of them, the magnificent cricketer Mr. Graham Pollock, played his last test match for South Africa, the Springboks, against the Australians. And Mr. Pollock made 144 runs in the first innings of that last game.
In a century for the great man in his last test, and on the ground...
Quite recently, as the England cricket team crumbled under the West Indians, it was spoken about on BBC, television and radio and in the press, and that the West Indians were aware of it, that the one hope for England on several occasions, as they said, were two South Africans. Why have they gone for her throat?
I believe that the exposure that they would get from an individual as against someone who participated in a team. I think there's always more exposure at somebody individually. And I think her background was another factor, that she was an Afrikaans girl, and I think they relate that more to the government or the people that are running South Africa. So I think all of the background factors made her a target.
Are you kicking a bit and screaming a bit inside?
Yes, definitely, yes.
Can you tell me, since I can't see it, can you tell me what you feel inside just now about not running in Korea?
It's a strange experience. I mean, I sort of block everything out to do with the Olympic Games. I don't want to know what's happening in Seoul. I don't want to see the television or any live broadcast of the games or anything. I try to live away from the Olympic Games, although it sometimes does get to me. In a way, I've become to hate running, in a sense, and everything accompanying running.
I don't know. You know, of course, at my age, I worry about what I think on my deathbed. And I want a minimum of regrets. Now, if I could run, say, the fastest man at the 440, and I once ran the 440 at White City, but I can't tell you about that now, I'll tell you afterwards, very funny. You know, but if I was, I suppose I'd hate to feel on my deathbed that I could have been the world champion. Well, might it come back?
Yeah, I think in time it will come back. I'm started training again, so it's one positive step back into running. I think I'll have to wait and see what happens, and get my mind straightened out again.
And who could be innocent Miss Zola Budd's enemies? Who could have worked so hard and efficiently to remove her from the 1988 Olympic Games? Perhaps Mrs. Winnie Mandela knows. This is one of her homes in the town of Soweto, which is just outside of Johannesburg.
With our necklaces, we shall liberate this country.
So, it's impossible for me to speak to Mrs. Mandela here. That's impossible.
I had been warned that the young men guarding Mrs. Mandela were dangerous, and that there were more of them behind her house.
Well, I have just been informed by Mrs. Mandela's guards that she won't discuss Miss Budd's sad predicament. Never mind. I suspect that the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, God's spokesman for all downtrodden people, can explain the little spot of apparent evil that has overtaken young Zola Budd. And so, on to Cape Town. I am wondering whether His Grace Archbishop Desmond Tutu has anything to say as a professional Christian about Miss Budd's innocent unhappiness, or whether he too is going to withdraw from the issue like Mrs. Winnie Mandela, and I honestly don't know.
I had been telephoning Archbishop Tutu's secretary, Mr. John Allen, for an appointment over a 2-week period, and he had given me no clear answer.
Is it possible to see Mr. John Allen, please? Yes, thank you. My name's Griffith, Kenneth Griffith. Thank you, dear. Mr. Allen, I'm Griffith, who has spoken to you. Forgive me this
intrusion, but I've traveled 7,000 miles to do this, and the only voice that I haven't got is the professional Christian voice. It's simply over Miss Budd. So I've come to ask you if the Archbishop... Thank you. I've got my crew with me. We're ready to do it if it's at all possible.
Will the keep them right here?
Bless you. Thank you. Bye-bye, sir. No, it's not on. I'm very glad you've mentioned Archbishop Desmond Tutu, because we've tried to interview him, and he really feels he hasn't got the time.
We had the time in Britain, and he went on a special program in Britain, which I saw on television, and he was very negative and very, in a way, abusive towards me, and seeing me as a symbol of non-violent sanctioning against South Africa. And they had enough time.
So you support the expulsion, as it were, or the boycott of Zola Budd?
Well, I would say that the way she became able to participate in the Olympic Games was a little dubious for us.
But you support it, Desmond? You support
I
support the boycott of
Zola. Totally.
I mean, I expected it from him, to be honest. I mean, I expected it from people like Bishop Tutu. And what hurt me most was that a person with a big golden cross could go on television and make political statements.
It is interesting, isn't it, to consider who or what is a Christian, isn't it?
I think the essence of the Bible comes down to humility, and I don't know if Bishop Tutu has enough humility in him. I think that's what Christ said was the essence, and what was most important was humility.
Well, third time lucky, I hope. The first two apparent enemies of Miss Zola Budd, that is Mrs. Winnie Mandela and her so-called football team, and His Grace the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, seem to have funked explaining why they have worked against her. And so it is now up to Mr. van der Horst, the past president of SACROS. That is the organization that works specifically against multiracial cooperation in sport in South Africa. And it is now up to Mr. van der Horst alone to try and justify the persecution against the young runner from Bloemfontein.
Zola Budd is the unfortunate victim, but nevertheless a product, and a very distinct product of the society. Coming out of a society where she finds herself in a privileged group, an Afrikaner group, with political rights, with political wealth and opportunities lying in her lap. And she grew out of it. Her roots are in that apartheid society. And when opportunity came for that, she had talent, she could reach world standards. She utilized those facilities at the disposal in order to go over to England. Now, the question arose immediately, why did she have to leave a native soil? Why did she have to leave this country? And that is the hub of the question. The hub of the question, she had to leave it because the country is isolated, it's boycotted, it's ostracized, because it believes in the policy of white domination, white supremacy, which is a heritage of the Nazi German idea of Hitler, of a superior race, which is entrenched by law and practice in this country, institutions. And she, in fact, grew up under those things. She was nurtured under those values.
Athol Fugard, the distinguished South African writer, once said to me about the people who advocate boycotts, and I think that that is less vicious than what they have done to you personally. I mean, then I think they have sunk to pretty petty cruelty. That's my own view. He said,
I sometimes have the feeling, and it's a hard statement and a crude statement, but I will make it, that I'm keeping company with people who hate the system and its evil more than they are concerned with or love the victims of it. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, on what basis is one trying to do anything about South Africa? Is it because one hates or because one loves?
Did you digest that?
Yes, definitely.
That these people hate the system more than they love the victims of it. I think it's a very interesting statement, isn't it?
Yes, I would say people like Bishop Tutu or Alan Boesak or Sam Ramsamy would go out of their way to attack the system and apartheid, which symbolizes South African government in their eyes, and without thinking of the consequences it has for other people, and just thinking of what you can do for them to further their ends and their careers.
Mr. Sam Ramsamy, here in London, is the expert at boycotting South African athletes. More than anyone else, he was responsible for banishing Miss Zola Budd back to Bloemfontein.
She's been asked repeatedly about her position on apartheid, etc. I believe she has a right to tell everyone. She is not any athlete coming from any other part of the world. She's an athlete coming from a country which has been excluded from international competition because of that country's racial policies. Now, I put myself, and I've asked many people who are 17 years old, if they had the similar position, if they were in the similar predicament as Zola Budd was, if someone asked you whether they are against apartheid or for apartheid, what would you say? Immediately, all of them spontaneously answered. They will immediately say they're against apartheid.
Who are these people that you've asked?
This country, athletes from this country here, athletes from Africa, athletes, South African athletes I've asked, and all over.
I think just about all athletes were very friendly towards me and very helpful. And I think my favorites, it's difficult to say who my favorites were, but people I have the most respect for is probably Steve Cram and Fatima Whitbread and Steve Ovett, and then Liz Lynch, who is married now.
What did you think of I read it out of the corner of my eye almost before I left Britain, one of the athletes saying, well, if she isn't going to run, I don't want to run.
Was a marathon runner, Hugh Jones. Yes. I have very much respect for that statement because he really won a place for the Olympic Games. So to have said that took a lot of courage from him because he was prepared to sacrifice his place in the Olympic Games. So I have very much respect for that statement, yes.
Zola Budd shields behind this very old myth that is a political question. Apartheid is not a political question. It is simple racism.
It really is crucifying her to say, tell us now, and if you agree with Mr. Ramsamy and his colleagues, you can compete at the Olympics, and if you don't say what they want to hear you say, you will not.
No.
And the young lady kept her mouth shut.
Many
and
people...
how can she, Mr. Ramsamy? I ask you now, I'm appealing to you as a human being, how can you expect a young lady in her teens, for the sake of great wealth, great fame, to deny her people or the way her people are behaving 6,500 miles away? Is there not some virtue in saying, I cannot comment 6,500 miles away. I'm not saying I approve or disapprove. Whether in fact she said nothing. She might have said, I really honestly don't know.
She said nothing, but saying silence indicated to many people that there was a leaning towards apartheid.
Well,
and we have to accept that.
That is,
now, that is a...
Well, that's
that
an implication that Mrs. Thatcher is levelling us at the moment in northeastern Ireland.
Yes.
That if you say nothing, it implies guilt.
She did betray, if you want to expand that particular point.
Yes, please.
She did betray her people by taking a British passport.
Oh, but now you can't have it every way.
No, I'm only posing all these different
but
problems.
They understood. I understand.
Yes.
Americans understand. I'm sure Russians understand. Here you cannot, you've got this God-given gift of running perhaps faster than any other woman at 5,000 meters. Now you cannot do it while you hold a South African passport. And I'm sure there was an area of sympathy in this country, as well as wanting a gold medal. I don't think that there is one person that I know of, except for a committed political man like yourself, who would blame her for that.
Professor Christian Barnard has always been a compulsive, independent spirit, whether he was revolutionizing surgery, the first heart transplant ever, or now facing up to the cruel dilemma that is confronting South Africa. And he is no particular friend of either the political left or the political right. But he has always cared for human beings, whether they be black or white.
If we ever get accepted back in international sport, then we should build a monument to Peter Hain. Because there's no doubt about it, we started the business. We started this idea of telling other countries which members they can include in their teams. There was the famous case of De Oliveira, who was not allowed to be chosen by the MCC. There were many other incidences, so we started it. And I personally think that the campaign that was started against us, it was a very good thing. I doubt it very much if we would have had such integration in the field of sports today if it was not for the isolation that we were submitted to. I think the beginning of the boycotts were correct, but I don't believe the continuation is correct. You know, I feel we like the prodigal son. We've sinned and we've strayed away from the home of our father, but then we repented. We repented. But unlike the father of the prodigal son, the Western world says, we don't want you back. You stay outside there, we will boycott you, we will punish you, you stay there. What they should do is like the prodigal son as father. Says, look, we see that you've changed your ways, and you've repented, you see that we know that you know you were wrong, now we will accept you back and we will help you. That's what they should do.
Mrs. Helen Sussman has impressed even around the world with her non-stop battle for what the English have described as fair play, particularly here in South Africa.
I'm anti-apartheid myself, but that does not mean that I go along with the strategies that are proposed by other anti-apartheid people or organizations. I don't go along with many of the strategies, such as sanctions and disinvestment. So poor Zola Budd has become the symbol of the apartheid regime, and as such, of course, she herself is also now targeted, and I think that really sums it up.
Why have they placed such intense focus on that young woman? I really seriously want to know that. Why?
I think she was warned against spending too much time here, but really and truly you could hardly bar the girl from coming back to visit her family and to be at home whenever she wanted to. She was probably very lonely, apart from anything else. And as long as she did not break the rule about participation here, well, I think that it was very unfair of them to use that in order to bar her from participating in the Olympic Games.
I think you're dealing with hard people. I think the sensitivity or the sensitive side is probably been lost. I think they are pursuing a cause, as I said earlier, and you know, that's as far as it goes. I don't think you're going to get the sympathetic response that you would expect from somebody in their capacity.
That small group that is running the campaign against South Africa is very efficient, well organized, and they are very vindictive. They can ruin your career.
I have known Mr. Albie Sachs for many years. He is a member of the ANC, the African National Congress, Recently he was attacked in Mozambique in Southeast Africa, and he has been left brutally maimed. He now lives in London.
On the one hand, you know, she's a lovely young person with a tremendous talent for running and a lot of courage as an athlete. To me, the predicament is, why is it that I, and I'm sure the overwhelming majority of South Africans, want to see her lose? Why can't we take any pride in her? When I say South Africans, I mean South Africans, black, white, brown, and so on. I'm sure if you took a poll in South Africa, you know, you would find out the mass of the people, the black people, and many whites like myself, we want to see her lose. I know that whenever she ran in a race, my big fear was that she would win. And then I think about, now, why is it? You know, what's going on in my head? You know, am I just a heartless, cruel person? Am I just a victim of propaganda? And I know it's not that. Because I feel she's not running she hasn't been running for years anymore as herself, as Zola Butt. She's running for white South Africa. I don't mean unconsciously in her own head. That's the way she's emerged. She's emerged as an athlete who represents something. She's running to break the boycott.
I'm sad for her because I would love to have seen her, in fact, taking a medal at the Olympics. It would have been a great triumph.
Just before I left, I saw a road race in Durban, and the streets were crowded with thousands and thousands of people. I'm telling you the simple truth. The first two to come in were blacks, and they were cheered and cheered by the white citizens of the city. What did you feel, do you recall, about people apparently expressing even hatred of you?
Yes, I remember quite vividly one evening at Crystal Palace, and while warming up, some people would swear at you and things like that. And while I was running, a demonstrator ran onto the track and
As we watch, nearest to the camera is Susan Tooby, and 23 is Angela Tooby. I think there was a little, yes indeed, one or two protesters being pushed off the course there. I thought I saw one of the marshals coming on to remove them, and indeed we were threatened by the anti-apartheid protesters that they would make some kind of demonstration against the appearance of Zola Butt here today.
I think that really made me realize how big the intensity against South Africa was.
What do you think is the mentality of those people who have done those things to you?
I wouldn't know. I've never met any one of them personally. I've seen what they've said on television, and I've heard what they've said on radio, and read what they've said in newspapers. So I wouldn't know them personally and what their personal outlooks on life would be, and what they personally feel and think. So I can't really make a statement what their mentality would be.
Tell me, how did you find people in Britain?
People I've met in Britain and people on the street were always friendly towards me. And I've never met anyone personally who was abusive or antagonistic towards me. So that was always sort of a consolation, although the newspaper articles would be negative. The people I'd meet every day on the street and my neighbours in the area I lived was very friendly and helpful. And so my neighbours were very friendly especially. So I had happy times in Britain, definitely. I mean, I'm an expert on Surrey tea rooms.
Yes.
And things like that, so I really enjoyed.
Did you enjoy the Surrey tea rooms?
Yes, very much.
Scones and a bit of cream and jam?
Yes, scones and cream.
Well,
well, she's going to be chased by the anti-apartheid movement all along until she clarifies this position. There's no doubt about that.
But it is persecution, isn't it?
It's only persecution.
In a good cause, let's say.
No, it's not persecution. A good cause doesn't persecute. Anything with a good cause doesn't persecute anyone.
But of course, the one thing that they will achieve is that they will get their names in the newspapers, they will get their pictures in the newspapers, and they will get publicity. That's what they will. That's the only thing they will achieve. I mean, a man like Archbishop Tutu, nobody in the world would have known about him if it was not for apartheid. He would not have had the Nobel Prize if it was not for apartheid. He would not have been Archbishop if it was not for apartheid. If apartheid tomorrow disappears, Bishop Tutu disappears. And that's what most of the people know. These entertainers in America and these people who give the concerts on Mr. Mandela, they do it for one reason. They can't care a damn what happens to people in South Africa. They do it for one reason, and that is, what do I get out of it? Human beings are selfish, you know. That's human nature, and all they care what I get out of it.
The chief minister of South Africa's largest and most famous black nation, the Zulus, is Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Though the Zulus are a formidable martial race, Chief Buthelezi is a statesman, and he is holding out a careful hand of reconciliation to the white people.
I do sympathize with her because she's really a victim of circumstances herself, because these are not circumstances of her own making, and she's paying a price for something that she's not responsible for. She's not the author of apartheid. And I do, therefore, in that sense, sympathize with what has happened to her, because I think she has been hounded in a manner which, in fact, from purely a human point of view, is completely unacceptable. For one so young to be hounded in the manner in which she was hounded, you know, even when she took advantage of the fact that she could get a British passport, which was legitimately issued to her. But even then, I think there was an incident where another South African girl who just happens to have similar features as Zola was mistaken for her, and she was accused of having participated in sport in South Africa when she hadn't done so.
No, I didn't compete, but they said competing as much wider than just running, whereas watching a race or actually be at a race and encouraging people and like giving out prizes and things like that. They said that was competing, and so I was banned for a year from international athletics.
Another distinguished South African athlete whom I once saw cut through an English rugby football team, I saw it with my own eyes, is Mr. Errol Tobias.
Tobias is going to score on his own. Tobias going for the corner. Errol will score here. He does. A lovely try by Errol Tobias. He had Errol Williams with him, but there was the dummy, the power, and look how delighted he is, Errol Tobias, with that try, his first try in a test match, and it certainly was lovely stuff. It was continued pressure, that final change of direction by Rob Lowe, the good pass by
and he lives here in the old Cape of Good Hope.
When you were selected to play for South Africa, were you astonished that you'd been selected?
Ken, no, I wasn't astonished. I knew it was coming for me because at that stage I was the best attacking the running fly-off in the country. So I knew I had to get my chance, one or the other.
What were your feelings when you learnt that you were going to be a Springbok?
Well, that was marvelous. I can't express myself, but it's one of those things. And for me, it was a great honor to represent my country.
A collaborator with apartheid. He sells his soul for 30 pieces of silver in a situation where people are dying and struggling against the system.
Oh, come on now.
That is the situation that pertains here in this country.
You're really saying that about Mr. Errol Tobias, and that he is a collaborator?
Oh, yes.
What he says, of course, because we've already interviewed him, is that he really is trying to build bridges, that he really has a Christian instinct towards it.
He's giving recognition to a race set up. He's allowing me to make propaganda, to pull the wool over the eyes of the international community, to pretend that changes are taking place.
May I ask you a very personal question, though we're all glad I will answer it for myself. Are you a Christian?
Yes, I came up in a Christian upbringing, and can I tell you this much? The Christian church that I was born and baptized into rather, and I grew up, is segregated.
I would say that Jesus Christ would be appalled at apartheid in a Christian church. He would be appalled. You hear me? Now, what do you think Jesus Christ would say about Zola Bud up in Bloemfontein? What do you think? Think about it very carefully. What do you think that he, with a capital H, would say about the tragedy of her life? We know what he would say about the tragedy of black lives. Now, what would he say about her tragedy?
It would be very presumptuous of me to pretend to think or to say what he, with a capital H, would want to say about Zola Bud. But I can tell you what I would say.
I'm not asking what you would say.
Oh, yes, no, in fact...
No, I'm asking what he would say.
I cannot speak on behalf of an high authority.
Well, I will.
I'd be total presumptuous, and I would think it's arrogant on my part.
I will be totally presumptuous and arrogant to speak for Jesus Christ.
I would say
I am absolutely, he would say, that is a criminal activity.
You asked me
He spoke up for the... No, you're not giving me a chance to say. He spoke up for the woman taken in adultery. And he would speak up for Zola Bud, and I don't even claim, you claim to be a Christian, and you will not apply yourself to that question.
I would say she's defending an evil, violent system of apartheid. She's a product of it, and that if she has any decency, she would not even want to go out because she knows the world wants to isolate this country.
You listen for a moment. You listen for a moment.
You are vulgarizing Christianity in defense of apartheid.
I am asking about Miss Zola Bud. Why don't you get something into your bigoted head? I am ashamed of you at the moment, Mr. Van der Horst. He's an innocent young woman.
Vulgarizing Christianity in defense of
and
apartheid.
You haven't got the guts to consider what Jesus Christ would say about her predicament.
No, you are vulgarizing the whole conscious church in this country.
I'm not talking about politics.
Apartheid.
I'm talking about an innocent young woman, and you don't give a damn for her because she's white. That's the truth. I've asked both Mr. Graham Pollock and Professor Christian Barnard, since I can't ask the Archbishop, what do they think that Jesus Christ might feel about Miss Bud?
Well, it's just not fair. What's happened to her, it's just not fair. And I feel deeply hurt for her part as well. I think they're avoiding the truth. And if they had really expressed themselves the truth, the way they see it, the way we all see it, then they have got to speak for a white woman. And that they don't want to do. And that's what I think.
It boggles my mind. Why a little girl like Zola Bud, who's a tiny little girl, a tremendous talent in the field of athletics, tremendous talent. Why they should pick on that little thing? Why they should make life for him impossible? Why she cannot compete? And the other thing that I don't understand is why the Western world allows themselves to be bullied by a small group of people. Be bullied by Africa, bullied by Asia. They tell them what they must do and what they can't do. And if the Africans say, look, if you do this, we are not going to send the team, the Western world bends backwards to accommodate them. My God, but I do believe they have overstretched their bowstrings. I do believe that. I think that the Western world is going to react. You've now already seen the cricket team that was chosen for India. I think you're going to find that the Western world will say, so far and not any further with this nonsense.
Looking back on it, I can think of them and feel empathy for them and empathy for their cause, and I can understand some of what they try to do. On the other hand, I feel very bitter because they robbed me of the opportunity of running internationally and robbed me of the Olympic Games.
Now the Olympic Games are over, I have returned to Bloemfontein to visit Miss Zola Budd again, and I have brought with me a video recording of the Olympic 3,000-meter race in which she probably would have run.
Start, and it must be an agonising delay as the seconds tick away.
Only the second time this event has been held. Wendy Slide, 2:46, the silver medalist 4 years ago. 7.5 laps of the track. The final in the 1988 Olympic Games of the women's 3,000 metres. And interestingly, both Slaney and Paula Ivan have gone out straight to the front. Mary Slaney, many hopes, of course, for her to win the title in 1984. But when she fell in that incident with Zola Budd, her hopes were dashed. Here comes Yvonne Murray down the outside to join the leading group and establish her intent straight away.
This is probably one of the hardest middle distance races to run for any woman. An absolutely cracking pace.
Can Mary Slaney produce another of her marvellous front-running performances here? She's had a disappointing year. She so badly wanted to make the Olympics this time a medal-winning performance. She was on the fringe of the American team in Montreal in 1976, didn't make it. She didn't go to Moscow in 1980 when the Americans boycotted. Her hopes were dashed when she fell with Zola Budd in 84. Could this be her year at last? And Murray has gone in front now. Ivan and Samolenko have gone with her. The bell in the final of the 3,000 metres. Yvonne Murray of Great Britain leads. Ivan looking strong. Samolenko in third. These three pulling away from the next group behind them. Yvonne Murray is in a medal position, but what colour would it be? The other Soviet athlete, Artyomova, moving through the fourth, and she's going to be strong at the finish as well. Yvonne Murray in third. Ivan leads. Samolenko second. Yvonne Murray isn't finished yet. 200 metres to go.
She's got a trap soft on the inside. She's going to have to cut back and go around them, which loses valuable ground. She looks behind as though it's all over for me, but she's got to hang in there for the bronze medal. It's going to come down between them, a Romanian and a Russian, as we thought it would. Yvonne Murray must hang in there. Don't look around. Go to keep the pace on.
Ivan leads. Samolenko, the world champion, coming to her shoulder. A terrific scrap for the gold medal. And Samolenko, the world champion, is the new Olympic champion. Ivan the silver. Yvonne Murray the Great Britain.
Ellen Bosch